Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Kris Paronto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
Oh yeah, it's that time again. The switch is on. Battle Line Podcast. If you listened a couple weeks ago, we played some excerpts from The Ranger Way, Kris Paronto's book, of course, and it had the full reading by him, and we played some of those chapters. And if you listen to the very end of that episode, I teased out that in a couple weeks, we'll do the same for the Patriot's Creed. Now, the Patriot's Creed, I feel like not as many of you read, because there wasn't as big of a push for that book as there was for The Ranger Way due to the timing, but then also just due to Kris deciding he wanted to do less media at the time that book came out. And not too shortly after is when we started the podcast. So there's probably a number of you who never read the book, never heard the audiobook. And for those of you who did, this will be a trip down memory lane if you read it 6 years ago. And that's what we're doing. We're doing a couple of chapters from the Patriot's Creed by Kris Paronto on this episode. But before we get to that, did you know up to 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated? Drinks like coffee and alcohol dehydrate you. They're not helping. Heck, just being thirsty is a sign you're already dehydrated. It goes deeper than just drinking more water. You need electrolytes. Think of this. Anytime you fly in a plane in a dry, pressurized cabin, you're losing fluids. Going on a 5K run or a good HIIT workout, high-intensity interval training where you're going to break a sweat, hydrate up with electrolytes. That's what I'm drinking right now. And you need this correct ratio of electrolytes, ideally following the ORS, or Oral Rehydration Solutions standard. That's the right mix of sodium and potassium to drive those electrolytes rapidly into the bloodstream with carbs. And ingredient integrity is key. Do you know where your electrolytes are sourced? Knowing where your ingredients are sourced is key. That's why Bubs sources all of their electrolytes from right here in the USA. That's right, sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, and cane sugar for all carbs, all sourced locally in the USA. Lastly, look out for third-party testing to ensure the product is free from all contaminants or dodgy ingredients and label claims. Bubs uses NSF for sports certification on all of their electrolytes. This ensures that you get nothing but the cleanest ingredients as validated at the highest level. You need electrolytes, but not just any electrolytes. Try the best. Try Bubs, Hydrate, or Die. BubsNaturals.com. Use the promo code BATTLELINE for 20% off your first order. BubsNaturals.com. Promo code BATTLELINE. Now, we don't start right away from the Patriot's Creed from Chapter 1. I found two chapters that were very different. For those who haven't read the book, it's kind of a mix between Kris's experiences, but also experiences from guys in the special operations community, in the military community that inspired him and that he hopes to inspire you with. And one of those guys was Tom Block, Ranger Tom Block, who we had on the show. It was great interviewing him, but we really didn't go as deep as the book goes in terms of Tom's story. So let's kick it off with this chapter all about Tom Block.
Personal courage has long been associated with our Army. With physical courage, it is a matter of enduring physical duress and at times risking personal safety. Facing moral fear or adversity may be a long, slow process of continuing forward on the right path, especially if taking those actions is not popular with others. You can build your personal courage by daily standing up for and acting upon the things that you know are honorable. Sometimes I think that physical courage, the kind you need in order to run toward gunfire or into a burning building, is easier to summon than moral courage. That has been true for me. Research suggests that when we are faced with a significant physical risk, we will go into a kind of robot mode and fall back on our highest level of training. I found this to be true. The first time I jumped out of an airplane, I was going to be the first person out, so I got to stand at the door when it opened. I felt the force of the air as it came blasting into the fuselage. I looked down and watched the tops of trees rush by in a blur as I waited for that green light to tell me to jump. Every nerve in my body was telling me that nothing was normal and that I should not jump out of the plane. I tried to calm myself by reviewing all the steps I would need to follow, but I was still nervous. Yet when the green light turned on, that was it, and I threw myself out the door. That is a form of physical courage, and I've always been pretty good at that. Moral courage can be more challenging. It is scary to confront obstacles. It is brave to make changes in your life. It can take courage to refuse to do something you know is wrong, even more so when other people around you are doing it. It can be hard to put other people's interests and feelings before your own. But I can feel myself getting stronger, both morally and mentally, when I make the right choices. And that leads me to be happier and more at peace. If you know how to use it, fear can be a kind of fuel to help you make hard choices correctly and stick to the right path. When I joined the Army, I knew I would be facing physical and mental challenges. But I was also facing an overriding fear of the unknown. I was starting something new and wondering what I was getting myself into. Sometimes I worried about whether I was going to be able to handle all the obstacles that the Army would purposely place in front of me. But my fears extended beyond failing to meet standards. Joining the military meant that I was giving up a large measure of control over my life. In the civilian world, and even many paramilitary jobs, your time is your own when you are off the clock. In the military, I was never really off the clock. I was subject to civilian law, military law, the rules of my unit, and in my case, the Ranger Blue Book. A higher standard. The rules for soldiers extend to aspects of our lives that are less likely to be regulated in the real world. If I were to violate the rules of the Ranger Blue Book, which is specific to the 75th Ranger Regiment, I could be RFS, Relief for Standards. In plain English, I could get kicked out of Ranger Battalion. The rules covered behaviors such as drinking and driving, drug use, and when we could and could not leave the base. The Ranger compound was isolated inside a chain-link fence with mesh woven through the links and concertina wire on portions of the top. No one could see inside. Whenever we left the compound, we were potentially visible to the public, and the Blue Book was specific on how we needed to appear. If we were not wearing civvies, civilian clothes, we had better be in starch and spits and a beret. That meant that my uniform needed to be starched, my boots needed to be spit shine, and my beret needed to be on the top of my head. Leaving the base wearing a training uniform, or what we called a fluff and buff uniform, something just out of the dryer, would have been grounds for an RFS. To be a Ranger, I gave up some privacy and certain freedoms. I was volunteering to hold myself to a higher standard. That is one reason I reflexively respect veterans and servicemen and women. Their military status tells me that they have chosen to be held to a higher standard. Many paramilitary organizations, like police departments and fire departments, also require their members to be subject to exacting standards. The question, for any organization, is whether members are living up to the standards and how seriously the standards are enforced. The Rangers are deadly serious about enforcing their standards. I saw guys kicked out for drinking, drug use, for fighting on the weekends, and for similar infractions. Trusting that your teammates are meeting standards is essential. When our squad set out on a mission in Ranger Battalion, one person had to be in charge. I might not have made the same decision my leader made each time, but I trusted my squad leaders and understood that our perspectives were different. The leader needs to anticipate every possible scenario, positive or negative, visualize the outcome, determine the course of action, and communicate it clearly. He or she may have information as a leader that I don't have. I need to trust that that leader knows what to do, and he or she needs to rely on me to do exactly what I've been ordered to do. Our team that worked so well together in Benghazi may have been made up of guys from different branches of the armed forces, but we all had committed to meeting high standards. We were all experienced operators. We had all survived demanding training, and we were all willing to sacrifice our lives for others. We may have had disagreements, but everyone was able to set them aside or resolve them so that they did not interfere with our mission. The trust that we had in each other helped us to be courageous. It is easier to have courage when you have support. When I trust that everyone around me is operating effectively, I find it easier to do my job. I don't think about death. I don't think about losing. I think I am going in there and kick the shit out of this mission. I don't care if the odds are 100 to 1 against us. That is the mentality that I need to have when I am summoning up physical courage, and I think that attitude is contagious. Courage breeds courage, just as panic breeds panic. When we were fighting in Benghazi, I had a feeling of courage that spread like a fire, and moments where I felt like I was 10 feet tall and could take on the world. I attribute that confidence to our team. No one expressed a moment of doubt, and our courage fed each other. Everyday courage. On some level, I don't know what was so special about our behavior in Benghazi. I truly believe that anyone who found themselves in my situation, who had served and was trained to fight, would have stepped up and done the same thing, especially if they were part of the same kind of kick-ass team. I appreciate that people are interested in understanding that battle, and I've come to think that part of the interest is because everyone is fighting a battle of their own. For example, it can take genuine courage to confront a health issue. I love it when someone tells me that something in my story helped them want to become stronger or more physically fit. I am something of an evangelical runner, so I get a kick out of the readers who start running, even though that isn't something that I write about much. I'm thinking about a guy who started running and stopped drinking, someone else who is training for a first half marathon, and a woman who started running and lost 50 pounds. It makes my day when people let me know that there was something in my book or one of my speeches that helped them summon the courage to confront a problem and overcome adversity in their lives. Every one of the warriors you have heard about in this book has displayed an impressive measure of personal courage beyond the battlefield. They may have witnessed violence and tragedy, sustained life-altering injuries, and confronted unexpected obstacles in their life paths. It would have been easy for most of them to descend into a permanent state of anger or disappointment. It is challenging to live life with a sense of optimism and purpose after experiencing the tragedy of watching your friends die. It can require an enormous amount of moral and physical courage just to live a heroic life. Tom Block. Sergeant Tom Block is a retired ranger from the 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, who deployed 4 times in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which ran from 2001 to 2014, primarily in Afghanistan. In some ways, Tom's identity has been defined by his physical strength and courage. I grew up fighting, Tom said. I was the runt of the litter and used to getting knocked around by my older cousins. I had to get tough fast, and I loved it. It translated well to wrestling. Tom wrestled at Wasaka High School in Minnesota and Minnesota State University, Mankato. He enlisted in the Army in February of 2010, and he distinguished himself right away. Tom was an honor grad, combatives champ, hand-to-hand fighting, and 4 points away from being the PT stud for his Ranger Assessment and Selection Program class, almost pulling off a hat trick. I love a good scrap, even if I lose, Tom said. When we were doing combative training, I was always the guy volunteering to get in the big fight suit. Tom also volunteered to wear the bite suit when his unit worked with canine dogs and their trainers. That is a unique experience. To have 90 pounds of fury coming down on you and to try to protect yourself and fight them back, he said. Tom is as tough as they come. Tom was on his 4th combat rotation when he was severely wounded in October 2013, when a bomber detonated herself near his assault force in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Tom was hurled 35 feet into a minefield. 4 people died on that mission, and 24 were wounded. Tom has been awarded the Purple Heart, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the Army Good Conduct Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal with Combat Star, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Army Service Ribbon, the Overseas Service Ribbon, and the NATO Medal. In 2014, the Army Times named Tom as its Soldier of the Year. But the price was steep. Tom sustained a collapsed lung, significant leg injuries, a broken foot, and multiple shrapnel and burn wounds in the attack. The entire right side of Tom's face was smashed, and he lost most of his nose, his right eye, and most of his vision in his left eye. He replaced his right eye with a prosthetic eye that bears the Captain America shield. which he described as a symbol of hope as well as a symbol that his life had changed. I opted out of having a prosthetic eye painted to match my real eye, he said. I didn't want to pretend to have a normal eye, to pretend to be the same. I know I'm not the same man I was before the incident. To me, the Captain America eye represents that change. I wanted revenge. Some people don't acknowledge the eye when they meet Tom, a failure that bothers him. Maybe they aren't sure if they should say something, but I want people to acknowledge it, he said. Someone who buys a Corvette doesn't do it to be inconspicuous. I wanted this eye to be something special, to inspire and motivate others to not let life beat them down. Maybe this eye is just my way to raise a middle finger to terrorists. In November 2013, about 6 weeks after the explosion, Tom was discharged from Walter Reed Hospital and relocated to the Minneapolis Polytrauma Rehabilitation Center, part of the VA system, to be closer to his family. He was still in a wheelchair but newly engaged. Tom, who had been dating Janine since 2012, was in intensive care, hooked up to machines, his face bandaged and with tubes hanging everywhere when he asked Janine's father for permission to marry her. He said, "Steve, can I marry your daughter? I promise to take better care of her than I do myself." After being discharged from the Minneapolis VA, Tom visited Fort Benning, Georgia, and met his platoon when they returned from deployment on December 7, 2013. The last time these men had seen Tom was in the hospital in Kandahar when doctors were unsure of his prognosis. 4 members of the platoon had died, and 24 had been injured, including Tom. That was a big day, he said. I was able to stand up and get out of my wheelchair to greet them. It was emotional for all of us. Tom's recovery and rehabilitation was just beginning. He relearned how to walk, and he still can't run on his right leg as well as he used to before the explosion. As his mobility improved, he was assigned to be a non-commissioned officer in charge of the gym in Alabama. He was not going to be able to return to the work he had done before, but the assignment allowed him to continue to improve his strength and conditioning as he helped others train. Matt Powell, the strength and conditioning coach of the 3rd Battalion, encouraged Tom to work out harder. It was tough, Tom said. Matt pushed me when I didn't want to be pushed. He pushed me when I would start to feel sorry for myself. In all, Tom has undergone 15 surgeries to rebuild his face. But his face was not the only thing that needed help during the first years after the attack. His soul did too. I was so angry, he said. I wanted revenge. I still feel like I never got to hit back or exact revenge the way I would have wanted to, but I don't think about that as much as I used to. Tom's wounds forced him to medically retire from the Army in February of 2016. He remained upbeat, but it was a tough transition. Growing up, I was a physical-minded person. This was different for me. It wasn't something I could just punch through or lift out of the way. But Tom had absorbed the never-quit ethos of the Ranger Regiment. I don't give up, he said. My story got a lot of attention, and I feel like I have to move forward to set a good example for others to follow. And Tom also feels a responsibility as a Ranger. If I identify myself as a Ranger, I have an obligation to maintain standards, and I can't be a jerk. During his years as a Ranger, Tom identified powerfully with his work. Being a Ranger wasn't a sacrifice for me at all, he said. I legit loved that job. It was my dream job. Every day was different. One day I might have been sitting in a Blackhawk cruising down the Chattahoochee, and the next week I'm cleaning the barracks so the next week I can go out and jump out of airplanes again. Tom had signed up for the military right from college. I was a kid, and the Army trained me, gave me the clothes on my back, a bed to sleep in, a machine gun, and all the ammo I could hope for, he said. Tom was young, gaining real-life experiences. It was a great fit for me, he said of his training. I have always been high energy. As a kid, I always pushed limits, even just grinding wheelies down a gravel driveway with complete disregard for my personal safety, hitting jumps and ramps and seeing how far I could get. Tom began deploying in January 2011. All 4 of his tours were in Afghanistan, and they were busy deployments. Adrenaline and excitement and fear. He loved that work too. I especially liked working at night. We owned the night, he said. Every Wednesday, Tom's unit would get an analysis of recent activity, which they would use to help plan their missions. There were these color-coded bubbles that represented different areas and types of activity, he recalled. When that map popped up and looked like a bag of Skittles on the ground, I would feel this great mix of adrenaline and excitement and fear. When Tom was out on patrol, there was no time to think about what if, he said. I just accepted that whatever happened was going to happen, relied on my training, took my opportunities, and performed. Defending the United States was a big part of what Tom liked about serving overseas. When you travel to certain countries, you see the conditions and effects of true oppression. People living in those places do not know real freedom like Americans know it. Sometimes when I see what is taken for granted here in the United States, it chaps my ass a little bit. But that's part of what I fought for, right? For people to be blissfully ignorant back here in the bubble. That can be difficult for people in the United States to relate to, especially those who have not traveled overseas to some of the places where Tom and I have worked. We do not struggle here in the same way, Tom said. We are not a perfect country and we can improve, but people need to look around and realize how well we have it. My sense of patriotism grew after my first deployment. I saw how it could be in this world, with no infrastructure, no streetlights, no paved roads, filthy water, people crammed next to one another sleeping on floor mats, disease, poverty. It's not that many Americans don't struggle, but it really is on another level. Many Americans also take some non-physical aspects of our security for granted, Tom said. In this country, you really can start with nothing and become successful, if you are willing to put the work in, he said. And we have the right to disagree with the government and one another. There are a lot of people I do not agree with at all, but we share the freedom to speak up and conduct ourselves in whatever manner we decide to as long as we don't hurt each other. That is freedom, and that is worth dying for. Tom's injuries made it impossible for him to continue working as a ranger. So he looked around to find what he was going to do next and came across what seemed like the ideal next step. It was called the Human Exploitation Rescue Operative, HERO, Child Rescue Corps, a partnership among the military, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the National Association to Protect Children. HERO Corps gives injured servicemen the opportunity to train in law enforcement, to learn specialized investigation skills and digital forensics, and to work to combat online child sexual exploitation by identifying and rescuing child victims. Tom and his wife decided to move to Massachusetts so that Tom could work out of the Homeland Security Investigations Field Office in Boston. Tom's wife moved in January of 2016, and Tom was planning to join her in April, after completing his training for HERO Corps in Florida and Virginia. But 4 months before he retired from the Army, Tom felt himself sliding into a depression. My wife and I both had good jobs lined up, but I didn't really want to move, he said. And my retirement from the military was about to be official, even though I was going to be working for HERO Corps. I was overwhelmed. Tom had been a ranger for most of his adult life. Now he found himself preparing to leave the Ranger Battalion, continuing to adjust to the physical and emotional damage he had sustained in the explosion, confronting his survivor's guilt, and entering into a marriage. All the urgent physical issues were being settled, but I was overwhelmed. And I really started to shut down, he said. I started to drink too much. Tom began to withdraw from his wife and to question their plans to move forward. We were living separately because of my HERO Corps training, and I was calling her less and less, he said. She gave me space, but she didn't want to quit. She was persistent, and eventually she challenged me to man up. I realized that our marriage and my new life might be a sinking ship, but that if I was going to go down, I wanted to go down guns blazing, knowing we had tried really hard to make everything work. I didn't know if it would work out, but I couldn't just quit. Investigating child predators. In April 2016, Tom graduated from the HERO Corps program with 16 other wounded, ill, or injured veterans and moved to Massachusetts where he went to work. Investigating child predators proved to be demanding and disturbing work, but Tom felt it was a worthwhile opportunity. I thought it would be a great way to extend the mission I had in special operations, he said. It was a mission to go after bad guys. I liked doing that. I wanted to continue doing that, even if I had to do it in a different way. Tom's wife, Janine, turned out to be right. Their relationship improved. We got better. I got better, Tom said. I became more honest and more patient with myself and with my wife. I had to work on accepting that nobody gets it right every time. It's okay to be wrong or make a mistake as long as you're willing to correct it. That was a big thing for me to admit. Tom didn't want to have any regrets, so he gave it his all. As we learned in Ranger School, you have to let your actions define your character, and you only know what is possible if you don't quit. If I quit on my recovery, I would feel like the terrorists won, and I had become another casualty, Tom said. My anger fueled my will to survive and to recover. I owe some of my willingness to push forward to a sense of defiance. If I give up or give in, the terrorists win. Tom knows that anger can be effectively channeled as a positive force. It's easy for guys like me to get angry and bitter, but you can use that anger toward a positive end, he said. If you don't like something, be proactive and fix it or change it. Run for public office. Educate yourself. Tell your story. Help someone. Let your anger be an engine of change. Don't get stuck in it. Tom credits his recovery to the support he received from his wife, a small group of buddies from the military, and to the relief he feels when working out, particularly when training for strongman competitions. Strongman competitions, which test the strength and endurance of athletes through weight-related events like squats, deadlifts, and overhead presses, have become an important part of Tom's life. After I got blown up, I was sitting around for 3 years off and on between surgeries, he told me. I did work out, but I didn't have a great focus, especially once I got through the initial injuries. I wasn't trained to go overseas, so I didn't have to be fast. I didn't need to work on skills like endurance for a particular mission. I needed a reason to train, and I guess not getting sloppy was not a strong enough reason. Tom's trainer at 3rd Battalion, Matt Powell, suggested that Tom might enjoy setting a goal of competing in a strongman event. When Tom moved to Boston, he joined a gym, Total Performance Sports, that focuses on powerlifting, has strongman equipment, and has hosted strongman events. Training for a contest and setting goals for each event gave Tom a sense of focus, and he turned out to be good at it, winning 2nd place in the novice class for his first strongman event in Boston. My ultimate competition is myself. Tom continues to train to be at a competitive level of fitness and hopes that he will eventually earn his pro card. But he isn't motivated by lifting more than other people. Tom's overarching competitor is not the person he faces in any given event. My biggest opponent is that voice inside me that says, "This hurts, and you can't do it," Tom said. So my ultimate competition is myself, telling that little voice to shut the heck up. The training has been positive for Tom's overall health. Working out makes me stretch muscles and give my joints attention that I might not otherwise, he said. If I didn't work out, I think I would be in more pain from my injuries. The benefits have been more than physical ones. Tom has found a supportive community. I have friends that I only know through strongman, he said, and it's good for me to meet like-minded people and lift heavy-ass stuff. There was no magic moment when Tom came to terms with not working as a Ranger. Instead, he progressed steadily toward accepting his new reality. I had to learn how to let things be, Tom said. I can sit here and romanticize the way things used to be, but I can't turn the clock back. And it wouldn't be the way that I remember it anyway. Tom's friend and fellow former Ranger, Ralph Cacciapaglia, suggested that Tom try riding a dirt bike. Riding has become a lasting habit. When I'm riding on those trails, I can't concentrate on anything but the narrow trail ahead of me, Tom said. If I don't pay attention, I will most likely end up in the trees. Getting out of my own head like that is very therapeutic. The transition to civilian life is difficult for many veterans. Tom believes that the adjustment would have been significant even if he had not been grievously wounded. Certain aspects of his new job made the transition even more difficult. I liked the people that I worked with on my job at Hero Corps, and I certainly believed in our mission. But it became extremely frustrating, Tom said. Sometimes I would find proof of possession, a downloaded image of child pornography or exploitation, and a judge would refuse to issue a warrant for further investigation because there was only proof of a single image. In my experience, there was never only a single image. I was constantly infuriated by the slow pace of justice. Tom's discomfort with the acts he was investigating intensified when he became a father in the autumn of 2017. After my son was born, I felt as though I could not take looking at what I was looking at and still be an effective father, he said. I was getting too angry. Small steps. After trying to set boundaries between work and home, Tom realized he was going to have to find a different way to make a living. I probably have some PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from my experiences in Afghanistan, but it is nothing compared with the way I was being haunted by the images and information I was seeing online in the course of doing that job, he said. I saw some truly sick stuff, and it was making me lose some of my faith in humanity, which I am still working to regain. Tom did make a change. As of this writing, in 2019, he lives in New Hampshire and works on safety and compliance issues for British Aerospace Engineering in New England. He is surprised at how much he likes his non-military job, although he still struggles with certain aspects of the transition back to civilian work and life. I gave 2 presentations today, and one of my goals was not to say the word fuck, he said. Small steps. Tom will need more reconstructive surgery. His right foot still contains 6 pins and a plate on the first metatarsal, and his nose will continue to need to be rebuilt in order for him to keep breathing clearly. His vision, of course, is severely limited. He needs to wear glasses and periodically update his Captain America prosthetic eye. But the life-altering blast has also changed him in a positive way. I would like to think that I was a pretty good person before the accident, but I think I'm a little more generous now than I was then, Tom said. I'm friendlier. I'm more patient, and even though I have always tried to motivate the people around me, I feel like I have something different to offer today. Sometimes Tom is asked to speak with others about dealing with adversity. I tell them that you need courage to confront adversity, even if the obstacle is personal or domestic, he said. When Tom connects with people who are struggling, he tells them all the things you don't want to hear when you are at a low point, he said. But they are true. You are not going to feel like this forever. This feeling will pass. You have to allow yourself to heal. You have to be able to let a little bit go in order to move forward. Tom has had to let go of a lot, and he believes that you honor your fallen brothers and sisters by being a good person. I know I fall short sometimes, but I still try to be a supportive ranger and to work at being as good a person as I can be. When people thank me for my service, part of me wants to laugh, he said. Being a ranger is the greatest. I legit signed up so that I could run around and blow stuff up for the rest of my life. I might have romanticized a lot of it before I got there, but I knew what I was getting myself into. The possibility of getting blown up is a risk of going to war. Like all Rangers, Tom has memorized and reflected on the Ranger Creed. His favorite part is the 6th stanza. Readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor. That still resounds after everything Tom told me, and recognizing that I volunteered is a big one that follows me to this day. I remind myself that I volunteered for this job, that I love this job, and that these are the cards that I was dealt. Anything worth having is never free. You have to go out and earn it every day. Embracing the values. Personal courage. There are different ways to be brave. Personal courage encompasses both physical and moral courage. Moral courage does not necessarily translate into physical courage, and people who are physically brave are not always ethically courageous, but both forms of courage are necessary. Physical courage is displayed by putting one foot in front of the other. When a soldier is faced with the possibility of death, whether it's because he is going to jump out of an airplane or face down someone with a gun, that soldier exemplifies courage when he jumps anyway, or hoists his weapon and faces the battlefield. It takes physical courage to be a firefighter rushing into a burning building, to be a police officer going down a dark alleyway toward a screaming civilian, to be an EMT hoisting your gear to the scene of an accident. Our society depends on men and women who are willing to display physical courage in their work. We celebrate the stories of ordinary civilians who display physical courage on behalf of strangers. The guy who stops a robbery in progress by subduing a mugger, or the woman who runs into traffic to pull a wayward toddler back to safety. We are not as good at celebrating moral courage when we see it, even though we depend on each other to display that kind of bravery in our personal lives. The person who meets unfairness with patience, disappointment with optimism, or adversity with will is displaying moral courage. The person who is willing to confront their own demons and interrupt unhealthy habits and behaviors is displaying moral courage. The people who work to support their families, both financially and emotionally, by putting their loved ones first are displaying moral courage. Sometimes it requires serious fortitude to resist temptations and put your values first. I'm not saying we should lower the bar to the point where we are congratulating ourselves for fulfilling basic duties and obligations, but it's worth recognizing that it isn't always easy to do the right thing, and certain things are harder for some people than others. Most people don't need to put their lives on the line when they go to work, but you might need to put yourself in the line of fire to stand up for what's right. You may need to speak up on behalf of the people and values that matter to you. You may need to make sacrifices in order to protect the people and principles that you care about. That takes moral courage. And the more clarity you have about your own values, the easier it will be to be brave.
Hope you guys enjoyed that excerpt from the Patriot's Creed with Ranger Tom Block. Before we continue, now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonis Defense, the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonis Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. Hunters, shooters, boaters, and enthusiasts can rely on the Photonis Defense Viper Binocular to become masters of darkness. The new Viper Binocular system carries the same features and benefits as the Photonis Defense Viper Monocular, with a ruggedized body, and harnesses the power of the Echo Intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. Visit PhotonisDefense.com for more information, or look for Photonis Defense product options from your night vision dealer. PHOTONIS Defense.com, PhotonisDefense.com, longtime sponsors of the show. We love them. And of course, we have the best ammo sponsor. Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition. It's designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. Fort Scott Munitions is available throughout privately owned businesses in every state, but you'll get the best deal through us when you go to FSM.com and you use our exclusive promo code BATTLELINE. Using that promo code will get you 15% off most of the store, only available to listeners of the Battleline podcast. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Kris Paronto, Battleline Tactical, and the Battleline podcast. And there you have it, FSM.com, promo code BATTLELINE. As I said earlier, the Patriot's Creed is kind of a mix between other guys' stories and Kris's story. That's more this chapter, Kris's particular stories and his experience. And that's what we're going to get into on this excerpt of the Patriot's Creed.
In April of 2009, pirates off the coast of Somalia captured the American cargo ship Maersk, Alabama. Many people followed the ordeal of Captain Richard Phillips and his crew, along with the successful rescue effort led by the U.S. Navy. But it is less well known that there were a half a dozen other attempts by pirates to capture ships in the very same week. Cargo ships, which are quite slow, were becoming increasingly vulnerable to attack. That summer, I was hired as a contractor to provide security for the ships belonging to a company called Pacific Gulf Marine, Inc. I flew to Cairo and then drove into Port Suez, a departure point for many cargo ships. These ships moved through the Red Sea like they were on a slow interstate highway through the Arabian Peninsula. Most routes could be completed in 5 to 10 days, so each journey was relatively brief. I had already had a few trips under my belt that summer when I boarded a boat headed for Cape Town. By this time, I knew that it was normal for pirates to run at us like wolves from their little fiberglass speedboats equipped with huge-ass Yamaha motors. When we saw a boat like that heading toward us, we, the contractors providing security, would make a point of taking highly visible positions on deck with an M4 or a shotgun. That was usually enough to make a pirate boat change course, and we'd watch it turn and roar off. Imagine a Prius with a V8 engine on it. That is the closest analogy I can make for someone who has never seen one of these boats. Tricked out boats like the ones the pirates favored can't handle big waves, and they typically stay close to shore, so the cargo ships tended to sail as far from shore as possible without adding to the time it took them to make a delivery. I tried to schedule my shifts on deck to coincide with the sunrises and sunsets. We had some beautiful nights and mornings sailing the Red Sea. I couldn't believe how gorgeous it was, watching the colors of the sky melt into one another before dissolving into the sea. I also couldn't believe how hot it was, even in the middle of the ocean. I began wearing shorts all the time that summer. Some people got a kick out of the fact that I spent the whole night fighting in Benghazi wearing cargo shorts. I only started wearing shorts on ops after my experience providing security on the cargo ships. I can't fight Mother Nature. Once a boat entered the Indian Ocean, the seas would start to churn. The weather had been pretty calm during the first couple of trips I had taken, but we hit some bad weather on this journey, about 4 days before we were scheduled to reach Cape Town. As we were sailing past the coast of Somalia, the captain wanted to push farther away from the coast for security reasons, but the seas were unusually heavy. I told him that I'd rather fight pirates than fight those seas. That was the truth. I wasn't scared of getting shot at, and I wasn't scared of a fight, but I can't fight Mother Nature. I was scared of the power of that ocean. The captain disagreed with me, and it was his call because he was the captain. So we put more distance between our ship and the coast. We got hammered by 20 and 30-foot swells for days on our way to South Africa. I remember going to the highest point on the captain's deck during my shifts and feeling helpless as I looked out at those swells. The waves looked like monsters. We would rise up high on them, and sometimes we would come down light and just rock back and forth. But other times we would come down hard, almost like the ship was hitting concrete. At one point we passed a Thai ship that had lost its engines, which really put them at the mercy of the ocean. The ship was being tossed around like a toy boat in a bathtub. We radioed them to see if they needed help, and they said they were in the middle of a repair and had it under control, but it made me uneasy to watch them. Even our crew was getting spooked. I knew that the cook and the first mate had made this trip 1,000,000 times, so it was unsettling to see them act as though we had something to worry about. For 3 days the ocean rolled like this. It was intense, especially at night, like being on a slow roller coaster. I cringed every time we rose up, half expecting the ship to break in half when it came down hard. Praying for rain. There wasn't a lot of rain, just heavy waves and wind. The bosun told me that actual rain would help knock some of the waves down, which was hard to believe, but I started praying for some rain, just in case. The captain arranged for us to dock in Durban in order to save the additional day it would have taken us to get to Cape Town. Miraculously, the sky opened up and it started raining a few hours before we docked. I quickly discovered that the bosun had been correct. The rain really did seem to knock the waves back, and the sea became calmer for the first time in 3 days. As we pulled into Durban, the foul weather broke and it turned into sunshine and blue skies. When ships enter the ports, they are guided in because the ports are so crowded. Another captain is flown out in a helicopter and he will rope down and guide a ship into an unfamiliar port for the last mile or two. At that time, Durban was a dangerous place, but from my vantage point on deck during that last mile, it looked like a resort. The sunshine felt surreal, and I experienced a peaceful rush as we glided toward the dock on calm waters. For me, the previous 3 days of sailing to Durban were more gut-wrenching than getting shot at had ever been. I do not fear men. I can fight men. I can't fight the ocean. I had no control over this display of nature's power, and I had to trust the captain to make the correct decision. In this case, that single decision, whether to stay close to the coast or head farther out into the sea, could have been the difference between life and death. Once that decision was made, there was not much that I could do. After that, I kept my feet on the ground with GRS stuff. Finding the way. I remember doing a 30-mile ruck movement early in my training with the 75th Ranger Regiment, moving quickly through a tropical environment with thick undergrowth. We were learning how to move tactically at a 15-minute-per-mile pace with 50 to 75-pound rucks on our backs and approximately 25 additional pounds of gear on our bodies, including our weapon systems and ammo. If you try that for yourself, you'll find that the pace is very brisk and the ruck is very heavy. Most of us were sliding over fallen leaves, tripping over tree roots, and trying to avoid the yellow jackets that were swarming around us. At some point, I realized that the experienced point leaders seemed to be keeping us on track and moving right through every obstacle without even using a compass. I was just trying to keep up, slipping left and right, and they were gliding confidently forward like it was nothing. How'd they know where we were? Soldiers learn the basics of land navigation during basic training. If you've read my book, The Ranger Way, you know that I completed infantry basic training twice. Once in 1995, the first time I joined the Army, and then again in 1999 when I worked hard to get back in. Each time, one of the first things we were taught was how to use a lensatic compass, which is a precision instrument used with a topographic map when someone needs to navigate an area without trails. We also learned how to shoot an azimuth, which requires sighting an object on the horizon in the direction you're traveling, and then adjusting the compass heading to make sure you're still moving in the right direction. In all branches of the military, learning how to read a map and even how to find a map are core skills that need to be mastered from the start. That can be more complicated than it sounds. When most civilians hear the word map, I'm betting they imagine one big image of a state or a town, and that image encompasses everything in a particular geographic area. In the Army, the map you are working with might be nothing more than a bunch of coordinates, numbers that coincide with each other. A particular map might cover thousands of square kilometers or only a few hundred. A map might have contour lines, which might help us figure out how steep a mountain is before we climb it. If all the contour lines meet and come together, that is a cliff. One map might need to link to another map as though they are puzzle pieces. Soldiers are trained this way because we might need to find our way in a field without much to go on. When I was on a deployment, it was a priority to really study a map of my location and commit it to memory. An American does not want to get lost in most of the places where I've deployed. When I am deploying, I continually practice my orienteering skills and consider it part of doing my job. I pin maps to the walls and I study them, building a mental picture that I can refer to when I walk or drive. I want to know my north, south, east, and west instinctively, wherever I am. And I want to know some key backstops and landmarks so that I know if I'm going to compound X, but I get to Bazaar Y, I'll be clear that I've gone too far and I missed it. When I was walking around on my own in Kabul, I couldn't just pull out a map or my GPS. If you're involved in covert activity, you have to look like you belong. If you are local, or if you belong in a neighborhood, you don't need a map, right? My job also required a high degree of situational awareness, which is compromised if I have to be bent over a map trying to figure out where I am. I needed to be focused on the environment, not on myself. Finally, we had to be on alert at all times, and if we got an emergency call, we had to respond as quickly as possible. To that end, we had to memorize map tables and all of their elements, the contents, the symbols, the colors. If we had time, our team would study a map before a mission and plan together. In training, once we have been taught how to read different kinds of maps, we learn about grid coordinates. Our instructors would take our units out to a land navigation range, which is a wooded area that has been studded with metal posts that have orange and white boxes on top of them. The boxes are about 10 inches square, and all four sides of the boxes have triangles with numbers on them. You might think that we would be able to see these boxes from a mile away, but we couldn't. They're exposed to the elements of Georgia, and they are rarely repainted, so they are not always easy to find. We'd be sent out in the woods with a map, a protractor, and a lensatic compass. We would have 5 points marked on a map, and we'd be given a time limit to find them. The activity takes place toward the end of basic training when the group should be working well together. No one has to get along. Everyone just has to work together. Each group needs to use their map to strategize the best route to get from point A to point B. The shortest distance may not be the best route, depending on the topography of the area. For example, it might not make sense to cross a marsh and then climb a big-ass hill to get to a box if another route takes longer but gets everyone there on relatively flat, dry land. Point A to D to C to B may be the best route. We had to use our protractors to figure all this out. Learning how to walk in a straight line. Try to imagine yourself in this situation. You shoot your azimuth, which means you put that compass in your hand, point it north, and turn it to figure out which way you want to go. Let's say you have figured out you need to start walking 152 degrees in a straight line, but guess what? You're in the forest. There are trees in the way. There are rocks. There are ridges and draws. In the woods, it is harder to read the terrain and orient your map than it would be in a city. Since you can't walk in a straight line, you need a pace count to track your distance. In the military, a pace count is in meters. I knew that every time my right foot hit, that was 1 meter. At a normal walking pace on flat ground, I cover 100 meters in 67 steps, counting each step I take on my right foot. So if I need to walk 500 meters on unobstructed ground, I need to count 67 5 times. While I'm counting, I have to pay attention to my direction, because if I have to deviate from my angle in order to go around some obstacles, eventually I will be completely off the 152-degree angle that I determined from my azimuth. In training, my groups always found this out the hard way. We always found our points eventually, but it usually took longer than the time we were given, and we would have to reshoot our azimuths and replot our course again and again, because we kept drifting to the right. Over time, we got better and learned to trust that compass. Navigating at night was the hardest for me to learn and become efficient at. I had the worst problems when it was dark out because I would feel like I was going the wrong way, even though I was following the compass. The face of the compass glowed in the dark, and I can remember looking at it and wanting to deviate a little bit just because my body didn't trust it. I would second-guess the compass, imagining that maybe I dropped it or busted it up in some way. Second-guessing my training and my compass always resulted in my being late to the point. We used to navigate over and over in all different kinds of terrain, and my skills improved, just as they would have with any other skill repetition. Over time, I developed more confidence in my equipment and stopped trying to outsmart myself. Navigation skills don't only help you get to where you are going, they can help you get out of a bad situation. I remember an episode in Kabul where some U.S. military intelligence guys got into a car wreck, and men who looked like the Afghan police on the scene were trying to yank the U.S. military intelligence guys out of their vehicles. The U.S. military intelligence guys in that car put out a call on the SATCOM radio channel that every American unit in the city knew to use to call for a quick reaction force. We need help, whoever's in the area. I then received a call on my GRS team radio calling all available GRS members to muster in the team room. Our standard operating procedure was to get to our weapons, armor, and vehicles, and then receive instructions that we were moving towards a location of the unit that needed help. When I got to the team room, 4 teams had already grabbed their gear and car keys and were shooting out of the gate. I kitted up and headed out with 2 other team members in a car. It's important to get out the gate. The worst thing you can do while someone is waiting for assistance is sit and wait for instructions. That is what happened in Benghazi. We were told to wait for instructions on site. In this situation, 4 teams were already out of the gate. My team was about 2 minutes behind them, and we all took different routes to converge on the location. As the Afghani police saw the show of force coming in, the cars and men kitted up with gear and rifles, they backed off and let the U.S. military guys leave their car wreck. The U.S. military personnel were allowed to leave and no one was injured. The seed of an effective response to that call lies in everyone's navigation preparation. When someone in trouble gives us their location, there is no time to start from zero figuring out where it is. A lot of the roads in Kabul didn't have names, or they had multiple names for the same roads or intersections. But it didn't matter because I knew the city like the back of my hand. All the good contractors did. We knew the grids and the roads and could respond without needing to look at a map or stop and ask for help. Some cities or terrains are easier to learn than others. Baghdad is hard to navigate. It is completely flat, so there is usually no terrain to note, and, as in many Iraqi cities, it is possible to walk or drive down a road that becomes an alley without warning. Something may look like a road on a map, but the walls of the buildings come in so close together that nothing wider than a donkey cart could pass through it. I have driven through rows of compounds with 8-foot-high walls in front of them and have been in situations where the road I am on just keeps getting narrower as I drive. I could blink and all of a sudden, I wouldn't be able to get out of my car if I wanted to because the walls are too close together for me to open the doors of my car. The roads are not all paved either, so if the road you're on doesn't have at least a little gravel, it will turn to quicksand every time it gets wet. If it starts to rain while you are driving, It will take no time for your car to get stuck on one of those roads. It doesn't matter if the car is a four-wheeler. We had a team in town once that didn't know the back roads very well. They were great guys, but I guess they were too full of pride to ask for some basic information from guys who had been there longer. These guys were security on an op and had a case officer with them. They were driving back to the base on a rainy day trying to make sure they weren't being followed, and they took a turn down what appeared on the map to be a road. But it turned out to be an alley that narrowed into what might more accurately be described as a walkway. Stuck in the mud. Once they figured out how narrow the road was, they went to put the car in reverse. And since it was raining, their car just sank and dug right in the mud. My team, along with two other teams, responded to their call for help. We got the case officer out of there, then switched vehicles and basically stayed out all night digging them out. Of course, the cars were burned, which means that their identity was compromised because the locals knew they had been associated with Americans, so the cars could no longer be used. There are a lot of things to worry about when we are working overseas. I understand why people might be tempted to prioritize other vital skills and objectives over basic work like orienteering, but doing so would be a mistake. That team that we dug out of the mud in Kabul wasn't a bad group. Mistakes can be made, even at a high level. Preparing for battle. In 2001, the 75th Ranger Regiment trained in a military operation in urban terrain, or Mount City environment, in Fort Knox, Kentucky. This was a state-of-the-art facility in which the trainers could simulate battle conditions in a mock city. They could start fires right there, and sometimes they would employ people to act as bystanders during our missions so that we could learn to navigate civilians and protesters, as well as enemies on the battlefield. We practiced close-quarter battle techniques, clearing rooms within buildings as a squad and a platoon, techniques to minimize our visibility, or the choreography involved in clearing a building from the bottom up and top down simultaneously without teams shooting each other. All of our training at this facility culminated in a night op that was considered to be the most challenging one at Fort Knox. Our mission was to locate an enemy and recover a teacher who had been kidnapped. I remember flying into the scene on a Chinook as part of a formation and watching through the open doors of the helicopter as we approached our target. We were banking it in order to see what was going on, and it was pure chaos on the ground. The mock city was on fire. Protesters were rioting, and the sound of the helos was drowning everything else out in my ears. I had been in on the op order because I was the acting leader for the weapons squad. The op orders are the directions provided by the leadership to coordinate the mission. This was odd for a junior ranger, since weapons squads usually have the senior squad leader as the leader. My weapons squad leader had recently been promoted to acting platoon sergeant since our platoon sergeant was away at First Sergeant Academy. I was overwhelmed by the responsibility, and even though I was prepared, I did not feel fully prepared for the responsibility that I would hold during this training op. My job was to provide support, putting up blocking positions as we cleared the buildings so that the line guys could get out with the kidnapped victim when they found her. I knew where my teams were supposed to go and how they were supposed to fall out and coordinate so that we could start suppressive fire. I remember feeling somewhat overwhelmed, but also knowing that my leaders had faith in me. I tried to terrain associate from up in the helo to find my building and anticipate where we were going to land. No matter what your team has planned or hoped for, a helicopter may need to come in at a different angle depending on the conditions in the field. We were aware that we might need to reorient on the ground at a moment's notice. I found our target building and recognized the area where we landed, so I knew which way to move. Our gun team used a specific method of movement as we approached the building. Another ranger and I were supposed to get to a particular floor within the building to start the suppressive fire. We were running with our rounds, tripods, and machine guns. My ammo bearer had an M4, so I put him up front since he would be able to set up faster if we got in trouble. The platoon sergeant had fast rope with his element onto the top of the building, so they were clearing from the top down. I could hear the platoon sergeant yelling at me over the radio. "Ranger Paronto, where the fuck are you guys at?" I called back, "Roger, Sergeant, we are linked up. We are moving as fast as we can." There was fire and smoke everywhere, and the illumination from the fire was whiting out my night vision goggles, so I raised them off my eyes since they were doing me no good. The civilian protesters were screaming. "Americans go home" at us, and even though they spread out when they saw us coming with our guns, they didn't leave the scene. We had a choice to make about whether to interact with the protesters or just keep an eye on them, which is the kind of call you have to make in real time. We decided to treat them as more of a nuisance and not engage them at the start. We got in the building and, following our plan, raced up the different stairwells, trying to get our guns in the fight. On the third floor landing, I met up with one of the leaders of another gun team. He told me that the staircase was not secure, so my team set up our guns in a room right there on the third floor. We started laying suppressive fire, shooting only when necessary and making sure not to hit the protesters. The sergeant was screaming at me on the radio, asking why we weren't on the roof. I tried to tell him that we understood that the stairwell was not secure. He didn't respond on the radio, so we finished that stage of the op there. Over the radio, we got word that our people had taken out the bad guy and recovered the kidnapped teacher. There was an unexpected twist, which was that the teacher was in a wheelchair and unable to walk. She had been recovered in the same building that we were in, and at that point, our job was to make sure that no one else got into the building while the rescue team was getting her out. The building was large, 6 floors with 50-meter hallways all around. I could see the blacked-out lights of the returning helos with my infrared vision through the windows. Our teams were moving back toward the birds at their predetermined positions. We were blocking, holding a clear path, and providing security for the team to come out with the schoolteacher. As they exited the building, the protesters started to group together, so we tried to provide some security for the squad leader who was pushing the wheelchair. "Start pushing, Ranger." Somehow the squad leader had managed to lead the charge to the helo and was pushing the schoolteacher in a wheelchair right in front with no cover. We started running hard to get a gun up front and cover this guy. Remember, this is a training op, so people are going to make mistakes. By the time we got through the complete chaos and saw the ramp of the Chinook coming down, I was smoked as hell. The schoolteacher got wheeled on, we did a quick head count, the ramp went up, and we took off, leaving the city still burning below in the distance. The sensation of sweeping up away into the sky after an op never gets old, even an op that was for training. My peace of mind was short-lived. The acting platoon sergeant was waiting for me when we got off the Chinook. The first words I heard were, "Start pushing, Ranger." I immediately dropped to the ground with my face to the floor and started doing push-ups while he yelled at me. "Why didn't you get to the top of that building?" "We were told," I started, but he cut me off. "You should have found another way to get to me," he said. "Keep pushing." I kept pushing and I didn't complain. Another sergeant, Hopkins, came over and asked what was going on. I continued doing push-ups as the two leaders conferred with one another. The truth is that I had a job to do, and I didn't do what I needed to do from where I was supposed to do it. I didn't get up to the top. I was thinking about how else I might have gotten there and whether we should have disobeyed Leonard and cleared the stairwell ourselves. Before I'd sorted it out, Hopkins, a big, soft-spoken guy and an outstanding leader, told me to get up. "Dude, you did good," he told me. "Get out of here." Embracing the values. Keep the faith. My life changed when I returned to the United States after Benghazi. I felt betrayed by my government when the events of September 11, 2012 became politicized. Many people were surprised that I wanted to continue working to defend Americans and I could still feel patriotic after what our team survived. But I've never lost faith in my brothers, and I've never lost faith in the people of our country. The truth is that if I could be my old self again, deploying and not doing any public speaking, I think I would go back in time. But I accept that I've been put on a new path. I believe that my story and the stories of other patriots have something to teach people, something that many Americans seem to need to hear right now. I know that listening to their stories helps me to be a better man. I am still uncomfortable speaking in public. Sharing the story of our night fighting in Benghazi is emotionally draining. There have been moments during the last few years when I've been sorely tempted to quit. But if sharing the story of my experience in Benghazi corrects the historical record and keeps the memory of Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty alive, it's worth it. If I can bring attention to the stories of other men and women who serve and the issues that we care about, it's worth it. If something in one of our stories resonates with a stranger and helps another person make a positive change in their own life, it's worth it. When I muster the courage to tell people about the ways that I've struggled and failed, I can see that it makes an impression. Particularly in a time when many people go to great lengths to curate identities on social media that are perfect enviable, and false. I still struggle, but I try to stay positive, grateful for my second chances, and mindful of how I'm using them. When I listen to the stories of other people who have sacrificed to protect our country, I am humbled. They help me put my own obstacles into perspective. They also make me proud to be an American. There are many different ways to serve, and you need to have faith that you will come to know yours. If there is anything in these pages that I have shared with you that causes you to reflect on your own values, that helps you to find your own mission, that brings you comfort or hope, or that helps you to appreciate the blessings of your citizenship, then I will feel grateful that I am continuing to serve. Our nation is stronger when we are all willing to sacrifice and to work hard to be the best possible versions of ourselves. Never quit.
And there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave some feedback wherever you're watching or listening. Really listening, because there is no video for this particular episode. Stay tuned here to Battle Line Podcast. I'll just tell you this. We have a very big announcement, if you're a longtime listener of the show, that we'll be making next week.
That's all for this episode of Battle Line Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.